Hi community of awesome, I'm Ava J and this is Bookish Pixie. So once upon a time, even after I'd started plotting, I didn't really keep track of the timeline in my manuscripts. I sort of just went along with how it turned out while I was writing, so I'd put down the next day or a few days later or the next morning, whatever, and I didn't write it down anywhere else. I just kind of went with it. And then the time came where I had to revise and I realized the timeline was all over the place. Mistakes were made. Apparently, when I didn't write down the timeline, I sort of forgot how long things were. So one day I'd say that something happened 2 days ago, and then another day while I was writing, I'd say that very same thing happened 2 weeks ago. And I would just completely forget because it takes a long time to write a book, and I couldn't keep those facts straight in my head. Surprise! It is really hard to keep an accurate timeline in just your brain. So what I started doing, so I didn't have to spend hours upon hours fixing the timeline in revisions, is when I started plotting, I'd immediately write down the timeline right from the beginning. So with my very first opening scene, I'd call that day 1, and I'd specify what time of day it was too. So I'd say day 1 morning, and then the next scene was day 1 evening, or day 1 afternoon, etc. From beginning to end, day 1 through however many days passes in the manuscript. If I was writing a book in a real world setting, then I'd also write down the days of the week, because I can't tell you how many times I'd accidentally written like 4-day weekends or a Wednesday that came after a Friday. Those little details are hard to keep track of in first drafting if you don't write them down. I'm a very chronological writer, and so far I haven't written a book that has a non-chronological timeline, but if you are writing a book that is not chronological, you especially want to make sure you're organized with your timeline, because it's going to be even harder for you to try to keep track of a timeline that jumps around everywhere, and it would be even harder to untangle that in revisions if you don't have an organized plan going in. So I definitely recommend trying to be as organized as possible with your timelines right from the beginning. And if you don't stick to it, that's okay. It is a lot easier to go back to your outline and say, actually, this took place on day 5, than it is to have to go back to your manuscript at the end and write down every single day that something happens, and then have to fix all those moments where invariably it doesn't line up because it's hard to keep track of in your first draft, as I said. So organization definitely helps. Even if you're not a plotter, I'd recommend at the very least writing down as you draft what day certain things happen, like in a separate document or a note. That way you have something to reference both when you're revising later and even while you're first drafting, so you don't accidentally repeat days of the week. So that's what I got for today. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe and comment, and I'll see you guys next week.